Hello, everybody. This is William Legault from Salem Digest, once again coming to you from the studio at Salem Access Television at 285 Derby Street. And we are continuing our Candidate Interview Series 2022. And today, this is actually a special treat. It's the first time we've had a candidate for district attorney in. So we're spreading our wings and growing the operation a little bit. And today we have James O'Shea for district attorney. James is from Lynn, and of course he is going to be in the Democratic primary against State Representative Paul Tucker. So James, welcome to SATV. Good to see you. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thanks, Bill. I really want to say thank you to you for having me and giving me this opportunity to address the voters in Salem. I know we just met, so I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. Like you said, I'm from Lynn. I was born and raised in Lynn, one of 6 children. There are 4 lawyers in my family, my dad who passed away and my 2 brothers. I grew up there and went to Lynn Public Schools until high school. I went to St. John's Prep in Danvers, made my way to Providence College, and eventually to Suffolk Law School. I've been practicing law for 24 years. As part of my practice, a high concentration of that is in criminal defense. And a big part of that, I've dedicated 24 years to working as a bar advocate, serving the indigent community in Lynn, Massachusetts, strictly in the Lynn District Court. I built a practice starting in Boston for the first 20 years and now in Stoneham with my partner, attorney Helene Morris. We also have a concentration in immigration law as well. So I've developed a long, over 2 decades worth of experience in the criminal system, working with DAs, not just in Lynn, but all over the Commonwealth, and serving the immigrant community as well.
So born and raised in Lynn.
Yep.
6 kids, that's actually a pretty big family at the time. I mean, you don't see too many families that size anymore. 30 years earlier, they were twice that size, so that's a good-sized family. The rough and tumble streets of Lynn. I'm not going to use the moniker that everybody else throws at it.
I hope not.
I actually like Lynn. I think right now they have an energetic young mayor, a great restaurant scene, and I think Lynn is knocking on the door of a return to greatness from years ago. But aside from that, St. John's Prep, not bad. District attorney. Now that's a pretty important position in the state. I've never interviewed anybody at that level. What makes you want to serve as district attorney? I didn't hear you say that you had a lot of time spent as a prosecutor. Did you do any of that, or are you mostly on the defense side?
No, when I was in law school, Bill, I trained under a sole practitioner before I became a lawyer for 2 years, Casimir Lopata. He worked on John Droney's office, so he trained me like a DA.
I see.
And I went to work for him for the first few years. Coming out of law school, he hired me after I'd passed the bar. So I've been trained like a DA on the other side. Plus, I don't think you can really be an effective lawyer if you're not preparing both sides of every case that you're looking at. So there is definitely a crossover in terms of the experience. When you prepare a defense case, you have to know exactly what the prosecutor is going to do. Plus, I'm working with them every day. What led me to that is I've had a desire to serve. In my capacity now as an attorney, I've served my clients one at a time. And I know what's working in the system, and I know what's not working in the system, not only for my clients, but for the interests of justice overall. So I hope to take that experience and broaden being able to help a wider range of people by setting policy and correcting some of the things that I think need to be corrected, and more importantly, expanding upon the office. I think anybody that seeks the public trust that is this office, and you're right to say this is an important office, it's critical. And I think anybody that wants to take that mantle should have new ideas and should be able to take the office forward and to confront the problems. One thing you can count on in the law is that it changes nonstop. So you have to be able to assess what you have and be ready and adapt to the changes that need to be made as the law changes.
Well, we're gonna circle back to adapt to changes that need to be made, because that's a very interesting and appropriate comment, not just in these times, but in any times. correct me if I'm wrong, but most of the people that serve as district attorneys seem to lean more toward the prosecutorial side than the defense side. That's been my observation. I don't know if how true that is, but I think there is some truth in that.
I think it depends on, I don't think you can paint anyone with just one brush. And I think a lot of times, I think, for example, John Blodgett was a practicing attorney. I believe that Kevin Burke prior to him, we've only had 2 during my lifetime. I'm only 50 years old, but we've really only had 2, maybe 3 DAs for a stint of 24 and 20 years apiece. And I think it's something that may change as you take the job, because I don't think that they were necessarily fully law and order at the time. And I think John's done a good job and served admirably, but I think that changes as you're in the job. I think more recently you saw in Suffolk County, Rachel Rollins was anything but law and order. So I think it depends on the time. I think it depends on the location, the county. I've practiced in almost every county in Massachusetts through my 24 years.
Which one have you missed?
I don't know if I've missed any. I just don't want to say something and then have it not necessarily be true.
Fair enough.
I'm sort of just covering myself, but I've been to Nantucket and the islands. I've been as far out west as you can go. I've been most recently, I was in Holyoke and Worcester. So it's not as though I just practice in Essex. So that gives me a great base to be able to see not only what's working here, but what works in other counties and other places, things that they do differently that I might be able to incorporate here.
Well, you touched on Rachel Rollins, and prior to that, of course, you touched on things that need to be changed, adaptations that should be considered and implemented. Rollins, of course, was more than a little controversial down there in Suffolk County. Took what a lot of people considered very extreme steps as far as not prosecuting certain low-level crimes and low-level, I mean, that's an arguable point. What's a low-level crime? I mean, they all impact people. What did you think of that approach? Was that too extreme? Did she go too fast? Are you looking at something like that or a more gradual approach?
I would look at a more gradual approach. The job of district attorney, to try to encapsulate it as best I can, is to protect the public. It's public safety, but it's also with a balance of the interests of justice and the protection of the constitutional rights of the accused and of all parties. We represent the Commonwealth and all the people in it, whether you're the accused, a victim, or any part of that system, part of the Commonwealth. So I think I would take a cafeteria approach to some of the things that I really liked that Rachel Rollins did. For example, I have an immigration background, as I said, and one of the things that she did was create an immigration unit to deal with victim visas, U visas, motions for new trial for people that could potentially suffer consequences that go well beyond what was intended by the criminal statutes in Massachusetts. There's nothing worse than having a provider for a family separated for life and deported away from their family forever. I mean, most of my clients that have been in that situation would rather do any number of prison years, prison terms, than to face something like that. And a lot of the times they don't know that those are the consequences that are going to befall them. So that would be something I would cherry pick from what Rachel Rollins did. But I don't believe at all in this decriminalization. The crimes are what the crimes are on the books. And my approach will be to look not at the crime itself or the charge itself, but to look at the facts and circumstances of every case on an individual basis, and to give my ADAs the discretion that they need to determine how they should proceed in the court.
We had a person here not too long ago who wears a lot of hats. One of them is a professional, is a football player, semi-pro football player for the world champion women's tackle football team. She's a Salem resident, but she's also works for the Mabel Center for Immigration Reform, which they deal, of course, with a lot of the issues that you just talked about. And one of the main issues they deal with is the process that exists to make somebody who's undocumented into a citizen. Very long, I think maybe senseless, convoluted, difficult process to work out. What can be done at the state level, specifically at the level of a district attorney, to fix that? Can it be done?
I don't think that we can talk about that without getting into the specifics of each individual's status and what it is that they're facing. Let me give you an example. I just talked a minute ago about U visas. U visas are victim visas, and that has to deal directly with our job at the district attorney's office, because part of the process is the U visa is issued to somebody who is a victim of a violent crime and who cooperates with the authorities. And they can't obtain that visa without having either a DA or a police chief or somebody signing off on their paperwork. So that creates a problem. If you don't have an immigration unit ready to do those things, to sign off and to review all these cases, what I'm hearing from the community and from the organizations like you reference that deal with these people is that we're not getting enough attention to these visas from the office. So that's one of the things I'm going to do right away. We'll address that, and we'll have a unit that will deal with those things. But you can't talk about, just processing generally immigrants without knowing what their situation is.
Sure.
Every person, whether they're undocumented, the first thing, I give seminars at the Bar Advocate office teaching what they call crimmigration. I've taught at New England Law School, I taught a class in what's called crimmigration.
Crimmigration.
Yeah, it's a hybrid that they,
okay.
Basically it's teaching the effects of criminal convictions upon immigration status. So you have to look at what I teach is what the law is that you have to look at each individual situation. How long have they been here? Do they have qualifying relatives so that they might be eligible for something called cancellation? So the immigration law is extensive. So you can't just say, well, we can do this for this. It depends very much on each individual situation, how long they've been here, whether they have qualifying relatives. There's a whole host of considerations that have to go into how you're able to help people.
A criminal record, of course, can be compiled many ways: minor crimes, major crimes, everything in between. One of the things that leads to a huge issue for the undocumented is getting to work, is driving, is having an automobile, and being able to legally drive. So the state legislature wants to issue driver's licenses to the undocumented. The governor says no. The legislature is more than likely going to overturn that veto. Where do you stand on issuing licenses, driver's licenses to the undocumented? It's not really a district attorney issue, but it's going to play into issues for you as district attorney.
I don't have a vote, but as somebody that represents immigrants from all races, countries of origin for 24 years, from all over, I have extensive experience with the impact of them not being able to drive. Let me tell you something else. As a bar advocate, when we see these cases come in for operation after suspension, all they do is clog up the courts. They are almost universally kicked out of the courts on a dismissal on court costs unless you're on the 4th, 5th, 6th offense. They don't get prosecuted for the most part because I think there's a realization that people are just getting to work. And it's not the most serious charge. In fact, the first offense, I think, off the top of my head, carries maybe 10 days in jail as the maximum penalty. Or I know driving unlicensed doesn't even carry a jail term. It's just a fine, potentially. So I'm very much in favor. I think the other side of that coin is even if you're, sort of, I don't want to say anti-immigrant, but if you're against this, one of the things this will enable us to do is to bring people out of the shadows and find out where they are, where they're working, who they're working for, where they live. So you'll be able to document some of the undocumented, which I think has a range of benefits for them and for the public.
It's certainly a benefit for any community at census time.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So the argument against it, or one of the main arguments against issuing these licenses, is potential voter fraud. Do you think the potential is really there for the voter fraud? Is that an issue or just an argument?
I think even if it's there, I think it's overblown, first of all. But secondly, I think even if it's there, it's outweighed by the benefits that we just discussed. So I don't see that there are lots of things we can do to prevent voter fraud, and the idea that voter fraud is widespread, I think, is very overblown. And I don't consider that to be a worthwhile. I don't see that as a meritorious argument against.
Overblown, but certainly a contemporary issue, is it?
Sure.
Not? Absolutely.
Oh, it's in the news all the time.
Oh, without a doubt. So, Lynn, good-sized city, carries a lot of votes.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, and it's a Democratic primary. Probably bring out a lot of the unenrolled voters. How are you targeting unenrolled voters out there, or just those that vote that are registered as Democrats?
I want to start by saying I've never done this before. I'm not a politician, so the hardest thing for me has been trying to learn on the fly on how to do these things, but I am extremely blessed and fortunate. I've got a team of people dedicating their time to putting that kind of a plan in place. And to simply answer your question, and I get in trouble a lot, Bill, because I don't come up with canned speeches and I don't do political speech. I just answer the question that's asked of me.
I think it's the best way.
So to try and answer your question, absolutely. I have people that are Republicans that are unenrolled. I like, that sounds
Yep.
like you flunked out of school or something. I think they prefer independent, which is sounds a lot better.
Yep. But that's actually, it's a national party. It was a party here in the state for a while, but
I think it would be sort of overreaching for me to say that I'm going to have some great impact. But one of the things that bothers me, and one of the reasons I decided to run for office, aside from being qualified for the job and really wanting to do the work and knowing how to do the work, is that I see too much disagreeable disagreement. We can't seem to have conversations on both sides anymore. And that's not what my campaign is. I've got Republicans working with me. I've got Democrats working with me. I've got the unenrolled. We're able to put aside our differences and have normal conversations without having to cancel people out or say, I think we've lost the ability to have those kind of conversations, and that's one of the things I'd like to make a big part of my campaign, is to say we can disagree without being disagreeable.
I think that's one of the advantages of the American court system is the civil discourse within the courts. Although I'm sure there are moments where it might get a little uncivil. I think it's built into our court system, and our legislature and our local governments and our federal government could probably take a lesson from that.
It's definitely built into our profession, and I'll tell you something, the biggest oxymoron going is civil lawsuit, because there's more contention between the litigants when we're fighting over money than there is when we're fighting over somebody's freedom, which is sad but true.
Oh, absolutely.
There's a lot more congeniality between the district attorneys and the defense attorneys, and we really do work together in a very civil way in spite of the fact that we're in an adversarial system. So it's, and I think that's led to what you say, which is that it's born in me to want to go that route and to not to want to have a more inclusive campaign.
So if you carry the vote in Lynn, and you carry it substantially, that gives you a tremendous leg up throughout the election night. And then you have Peabody, neighboring Lynn, also a very large voting block, and probably a little more Republican voters in Peabody than there are in Salem. And Salem and Beverly. Do you feel you're going to finish, you're going to run strong in Peabody? Are you getting a good feeling when you're campaigning there?
Well, I just forced my older brother to move from Reading to Peabody, so now I got at least 4 votes in his house.
You got your brother on your team. That's a good sign. Not everybody can do that.
I do.
So, okay.
I have both brothers, all 3 sisters. They've been brought into battle to get signatures. I have a sister that lives in Peabody as well. But no, we're absolutely going to compete in every city and town in the 34 communities. And that's what we're doing.
Yeah, and it's not easy. So
No.
I've never run at that level. I've run at the local, the municipal level, knock on a lot of doors. Is there a lot of actual door knocking involved in this? Is it more group gatherings, going to events and things like that?
All of the above.
All of the above.
I now have a very full calendar.
Let me see the bottom of your shoe.
Yeah,
Just kidding. I always think of that picture of Adlai Stevenson from the 50s with the hole in the bottom of his shoe because I wore a hole in the bottom of one of my wingtips.
I have
during the council
reserves.
campaign.
We're getting ready.
Absolutely. So you're campaigning the 34 communities. Let's just say that you win the primary. You're going to continue to campaign through the summer. Is there a Republican opposition?
No,
There's none, but
Nope.
you'll still continue to campaign now,
certainly.
I assume. So you're running against an opponent who also has some accomplishments: lawyer, police officer, state representative for 3 terms now. You don't have to give me your thoughts on your opponent. I'm sure there's plenty of respect there. But what are you going to bring to the table that's different from your opponent? Are you more progressive? Are you less progressive? Do you have any thoughts on that?
The first thing I would say is I didn't know Paul Tucker prior to getting involved in this. And one of the things you have to do is try and rally support and call friends and family. And I've never had anybody say anything but great things about Paul, that he's a great guy. The impressions that I'm getting from the people that are very close to me are that he is extremely likable. He's been a public servant for over 3 decades. So you're not going to hear me say anything negative about him.
I wasn't trying to get you
No,
to do that.
and I know you weren't.
Yeah.
But so what I would say to answer your question straight up is the number one difference between Paul and I, and it's going to be a clear choice for the voters, and that is experience. Paul's never practiced law. To the best of my knowledge, I don't think we've ever had a district attorney that wasn't a practicing attorney. I've practiced for 24 years. I've tried cases in every court in Essex County. And it's not about the trial experience. It's not about the DA having to try cases. What it's really about is about knowing the system and knowing the people in it, and more importantly, interacting with the assistant district attorneys that do the job every day, knowing what it is that that their desires are. What we have, Bill, is a system in all of the counties in the district attorney's offices where you have these amazing young professionals who are dedicated to their craft, but they're grossly underpaid compared to the private sector. So one of the number one challenges is, how do you keep those talented individuals working for you? And I think I'm in a better position to know what it is that they want because I talk to them every day. And I know that some of the things that they'll want is a little more flexibility at the district court level to be able to make decisions based on the facts of their cases rather than sort of a paint-by-numbers approach based on what the charge is or what have you. So I have a lot more to offer, I think, than Paul in that respect because I've been there and done that. I've practiced and all the things that come with that. So, and not only do I know the players, but I know the law and I know how it's applied and I know where it's working under the current administration and where it's not. And I'm able to make changes that I don't think he can offer because he's just not there.
So back to Rachel Rollins a little bit with the programs that she started down in Suffolk County. There's a lot of talk, and there was a lot of talk from her office about there's a lot of people in jail that don't necessarily belong in jail. There's a lot of people in jail for much, much longer terms than they probably should be serving, and there's not a lot of flexibility in shortening those terms, especially when the judges are sentencing people. What can we do there? Are we providing enough help for the people at the lower levels of crimes? Do we provide enough help if they have drug addictions, if they have family issues, if they have mental health issues? Are there things a district attorney's office can do to provide more help at that level to keep these people from moving up that incarceration chain? Absolutely.
And to answer your question, no, we're not doing enough for those people. The way I view our criminal justice system is it's based on 2 things really, and that is we punish ill intention, bad intent, and our system is set up as a rehabilitative system. So you have to separate out who are the people that are suffering from the disease of addiction, who are the people that are suffering from mental health issues. I can tell you, just to sort of dovetail my experience in, a conversation tonight, earlier today, with a young lady that I represent who's currently in South Bay, and she doesn't belong there, Bill. She's pregnant, she suffers from opiate addiction, and she's also got a dual diagnosis because she's got a mental health disorder. She saw her boyfriend killed or executed right in front of her, and she suffers from PTSD and a myriad of other problems. This is someone who is languishing in a jail that shouldn't be there because we don't have enough services to be able to get her the help that she needs. And I'm working on it. and I've had her placed once before. But as you know, relapse is part of recovery. And she had a relapse in the last program, so now she waits in jail. To answer your question as to what we can do as district attorney is we have drug court, okay, but in my 24 years of experience, the drug court is always presented to my client as sort of a final stick. In other words, when you've exhausted all other remedies, now you can go to the drug court if you choose. And it's not the most attractive type of probation to them because of the way that it's presented in that manner. I think we need to flip the script and start addressing this at pretrial with regard to bail conditions, with regard to possible rewards. Because like you say, the convictions of these offenses ultimately end up going into a cycle where people aren't able to get work, and then they go into depression because they can't get work and they can't support themselves. One of the biggest things we can do to help people is to put them back into the workforce, to give them something to feel proud about, to give them something that they can feel good about themselves doing. That's one of the things that we have to address in addiction, the disease of addiction that we're not addressing well enough right now. So I think to have to address these things pre-trial and make it more of a carrot instead of a stick at the end of some failure of probation makes a lot more sense to me. And the way I would go about that is to say, okay, we're going to give you an opportunity to complete almost like a pre-drug court. If you can battle through your addiction and you can stay clean for 6 months, then there'll be a reward for you in the form of less harsh treatment, whether it's a continuance without a finding, or something that's less than a conviction as a reward to continue to give an incentive for people to continue to fight.
That almost circles back to the immigration conversation of a few minutes ago. It's still it's some of the same results there. So the other side of the coin, especially on the drugs, other than the users, are those that are dealing, that are selling, that are manufacturing. The drugs are. It's mind-boggling how dangerous they are. And it just seems like they're getting more dangerous as we go along. Are we going in the right direction with dealing with those that we actually catch in possession, manufacturing, distributing? Should we be harsher, or are there more creative ways to deal with those guys?
I think, again, you have to take everything on a case-by-case basis. You can't paint everyone with the same brush. I can tell you that even in the Superior Court cases I'm handling, or more commonly in the District Court, you're not dealing with Tony Montana on the streets of Lynn.
Right.
These people that are dealing the drugs at that level are usually either feeding their habit, or they're out of work. They don't have the ability to have some other job, whether it's due to some socioeconomic disadvantage. They find themselves as this being the only out for them. Okay, so.
And a lucrative out,
right?
If you do it.
Well, this is what I'm getting at, right? These are not the low-level dealer is not making a fortune at doing this. The street-level guy is not. The other guys, the people up the ladder, those that are making the money, we can do a lot better in terms of punishing them.
Do we catch
my office would seek to punish anybody that's dealing at a higher level.
Do we catch enough of those guys? It seems we catch a lot of the street-level guys. We had a bust in Salem not that long ago. They just locked up the 3 guys, 2 men and a guy. Are we coming down hard enough on those guys, those mid-level guys that are making some of the money?
I would say 2 things. Firstly, from the district attorney point of view, you got to remember there's a hierarchy.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
So Essex County District Attorney may not get the mid-level, the kingpin. Those are federally prosecuted cases, and I'll tell you, they come down on them very hard.
If it gets to that level.
When they get to that level.
Right.
So again, my overarching approach is take every case, look at the facts and circumstances on both sides. What was done? What was the act that was committed? Who was the person committing it? And you get to know what was their record like. What's fueling their decisions.
You look a little bit at the motivation.
Exactly.
How did they get here?
Exactly. Like I said, our system is set up to punish evil actions, evil intentions, and that's what we're going to do. Anybody under my administration as district attorney that takes advantage of the most vulnerable, children, the elderly, the mentally ill, anybody animals that preys upon those people, those are people that are evil that will see the full wrath of my office. The people that are suffering from disease of addiction, the disease of mental health, mental illness, will have the rehabilitation component. So that's another reason that my 24 years of experience is so important, because I know how to identify these people based on having seen them thousands and thousands of cases over 24 years.
All right. Let's delve a little bit into the educational aspect of a district attorney's office to the public. I don't even know how much involvement a district attorney's office has in not just educating the public, but getting into the schools. A lot of organizations out there, they reach down into the schools, even Keep Salem Beautiful, the civic organizations. They try to start educating at the lower levels of the school system, reach out to the kids and teach them this is the way you should do it, this is right. Does the district attorney's office participate, conduct any sort of training like that? Do they reach into the school systems to try to educate some of the youngsters on what they do and why?
They do. John Blodgett, pay him a compliment. He does a great job with that.
Okay.
He's done a great job with that at Breed Junior High School, and Lynn, I know. This is a big part of crime prevention, and that's something that I would, that's a part of the baton I would pick up from John and run with, absolutely.
See, I wasn't aware of that. I was aware in Salem we had McGriff the crime dog for a few years and different things. So how would you would continue the programs that we have?
Absolutely.
Would you look at expanding that in any way?
Sure.
Or?
I've already had conversations. One of the things you have to do is you have to reach out to the various police unions and organizations,
Sure,
and I've already started working with some of the police unions and discussing that, and that's absolutely something that I would expand upon. I think it's a great program. I've got nothing but great reviews from the people that I talk to about those kinds of things, and John's done an admirable job with it.
So how many attorneys actually are on the district attorney staff? How many lawyers do they generally have working for them?
I knew I had to answer this question for somebody. So
well, there it is.
I looked it up the other day, and it's in the Lawyer's Diary, which is a red book that we all, a lot of lawyers subscribe to. And I counted about, I think it was somewhere, including the staff, it was somewhere around 75. But there were names in there that I know have already left the office. So I would say
probably not all attorneys, though.
No.
Clerks and...
No, that reference from the book was about all the attorneys. It was around 75. So I'd ballpark
for
it.
Essex County.
Yeah.
Now that covers all of Essex County, right? Not
Yes.
just southern or northern.
That's
Don't
District
break it down like
Superior
that.
and the main office.
And the main office. 75 attorneys.
That's ballpark. I think
ballpark.
Anywhere from 65 to 75, because like I said, there were names on there of people I know that have left the office.
So when a new district attorney comes in, of course you're not, even though some may do it, you're not going to clean house and just can everybody and bring in new attorneys.
Absolutely not.
But is there, and there'll be a process of familiarization. But do you see yourself over the first couple of years as making some changes and bringing in fresh blood, or?
Sure.
I mean, I'm sure you're going to have to anyway, because some people will leave.
Sure.
You have a network of people that you know, but of course you will interview.
I have the advantage, over Paul a little bit, because I know most of them. I've worked with them. It's not going to be a cleaning house process. It's going to be an evaluation based on what I know of them, and a conversation about where they see themselves in the office and where they want to go with it. And so it'll be a process. It's not going to be simply cleaning house.
What's the one thing that you will think to be the steepest learning curve for you getting into that office? Have you given that any thought?
I really don't know that I'm going to have a real learning curve, but I will tell you that I plan on keeping some people in the office to help me learn the ropes, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Just of the transition from private practitioner. Got to remember, Bill, I always tell people, and my worst joke going is that I could be a heck of a lawyer if I didn't have to run a law practice. So I've been running a small business for 24 years, and so it's just going to be a bigger scale for me, more people to supervise, but I'm not worried about it because I have the experience.
So what do you think, what have you given thought to as a top priority, or your top 2 or 3 priorities if you were to get into that office? Are there certain things that you would move to the top of the list?
Yep, I think public safety has to be number 1, and I have to balance that with the interests of justice and doing what I've been doing for 24 years, which is making sure that constitutional rights of all parties are protected. I certainly think the number one priority that I'm seeing, going back to the lawyer's diary and losing some of these young, talented lawyers, is retention of talent. We have to come up with creative ways to keep people on the job. When I tell you, Bill, that these people, these young professionals are passionate about what they do, the overwhelming majority would never leave if it weren't for financial, economic reasons. So we have to find ways to keep them because they want to be there and they want to do the job. And there's got to be ways that we can work around the finances, if you will. And of course, a big priority that seems to have been with us for far too long and is getting worse, except for within 5 states. Massachusetts is not one of them, and that's the opioid epidemic.
Oh, God.
We had, I think, over 100,000 overdose deaths last year.
It's just so easy to get this stuff.
And it's poison.
Absolutely.
And the fentanyl creates a whole different problem because the people that use the opiates don't even know that they're getting a double dose or a stronger dose because it's got fentanyl instead of heroin. And then
Somebody was bagging it up and didn't wear gloves, didn't change their gloves, or
and it knows no boundaries.
absolutely not.
No boundaries. If you talk to any family, somewhere down the line, they're affected by it.
All right, James. Well, thank you very much for the chat. If you want to take another minute or two to give a farewell statement, go ahead. Otherwise, we're gonna tune it out.
I just hope everyone in Salem and all over the 34 cities and towns in Essex County will give me fair consideration and consider casting a vote for me on September the 6th in the primary, the day after Labor Day. I know it's tough to get out and do that, but I hope you'll do your civic duty and consider me and give me a vote. Thank you very much, Bill, for having me.
It was
I really
a pleasure,
appreciate it.
absolutely. And that's it, guys. This is William Legault from Salem Digest in the studios at Salem Access Television on Derby Street with James O'Shea, candidate for district attorney. The primary election is the 6th of September. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back again with another interview before you even get out of your couch, I'll bet. That's it, guys. Thank you very much.